BVI, baby. British Virgin Islands, this one's for us. Put your hands up. BVI, yes. BVI. Hands, sing BVI and wave them to the sky. Rock from side to side. Represent the Virgin Islands. Hands, sing BVI.
Good day, listeners. I am your host, Shayna Smith, welcoming you to the Vigilate Dialogues. Our goal, as always, is to speak about the current affairs and focus on the solutions that improve our quality of life as we build a country for our children's children to be proud to call home. Text a friend and tell them tune in at www.cbnvirginislands.com and click on the FM 90.9 stream. The Vigilante Dialogues is sponsored by Smith & Associates, the Strategic Planning and Project Management Specialist. Contact them at 340-1199 to schedule a free half-hour consult to discuss your project needs. These past episodes, we've actually been talking about our Virgin Islands History Project that we kicked off a few months ago. And with me today, I have back Ms. Bernadine Louis, the director of the HLSCC Virgin Islands Studies Institute. We've been talking about our political history and heritage, and it's been a very interesting conversation because there are even a few things that I have been learning, and I hope that you guys have been keeping track. Today, we're going to pick back up in the 1960s, was I think around the time frame that we left off, Ms. Louis. And we were saying that it was sort of a golden age because a lot of political development or advancement had been taking place since the reconstitution of the Legislative Council back in 1950. And, you know, again, in that short space, that 10 years, we actually had about 2 or 3 political constitutional advancements as far as it being updated and changed. So, you know, it's really amazing, you know, when we think about it, it seems as if we slow down after the century change. But, you know, we're going to sort all of that out, I guess, in coming discussions about the current constitution. So we picked up and we were saying that in the 60s, you know, there was that golden age. We had the opening of the Dixby Resort, the commercial bank, a first commercial bank opened, the BVI High School, the Morris Yacht Charter Company. Telephone cable was laid from Bermuda to Tortola, so that expanded our communications network. Postal service to Jamaica was introduced. The U.S. currency became our legal tender, and the electricity service was extended throughout Tortola. And we also had the infamous Wickham-Ski Development Agreement in that decade, in the 60s. So I think we left off at this point specifically where we had said that the 4th and 5th general elections were held in 1960 and 1963, respectively. The office of governor of the Leeward Islands was abolished in 1960, and the administrator now reported directly to the colonial office. So that's the person who we now call the governor today, right? Basically, okay. And so they had all the powers of the governor before vested in that position. All right, so more agitation for political reform in 1963. And that's where we had the Commissioner Mary Proudfoot came in and did a review, but that wasn't accepted by the opposition members. And so there was a constitutional meeting in 1966. And yes, so this was at this point now where we actually were able to get the ministerial system. So I guess, you know, explain to us what the ministerial system meant when that was implemented in the next constitutional review.
Good morning, everyone. Again, Shayna, thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here as we continue the Virgin Islands story in this dialogue. Yes, it has been interesting indeed as we map the progress of the Virgin Islands to this point. And like you said, now we are here in the 1960s, and things are beginning to shape up in terms of additional responsibility and autonomy in steering our affairs, the affairs of the country. Mm-hmm. So at that time now, this is 1967, Mary Proudfoot came in and her constitutional report made a number of recommendations, and they were in the Virgin Islands Constitution Order of 1967, which gave us the ministerial system, and you had the office of the chief minister, and 2 other ministries were created. We went from 5 to 7 electoral districts, and they established the executive council, which made the policy decisions. So, and that was the chief minister's, body and his ministers. So they were responsible, more and more responsible for making decisions for the territory. At that time, too, I understand that's when political parties came in, and.
So who were those parties?
The parties that, as I continue looking into the research and so on, were the People's Own Party, that was Fonseca.
Okay.
And then we had the BVI Democratic Party with Dr. Q.W. Osborne, and the United Party, which was Stout's party. Okay. And so when he became the chief minister, he won under the United Party. But subsequently, as we'll talk about later on, he formed the Virgin Islands Party. So the ministerial system in 1967, Stout became the first chief minister of the territory. One of the things that tickled me as I was going through the research, they made reference to in this book, and I would like to say that this book about empowerment through representation, which chronicles the 50th anniversary of the restoration of the Legislative Council. Okay. It's a very, very good resource, and it's a resource that really gives a lot of this information about what happened over those...
that first 50 years.
Yeah, that first 50 years, and now we're into 70 years in 2020, and it's a resource that document that I think that, if you don't have it at home or you don't have a personal copy, you can try and get one. We have it as one of the resources for the Virgin Islands history program at the college. Okay. But I would like to see it hopefully in the secondary school, and they're actually teaching the Virgin Islands history, the Virgin Islands story, as we are calling it, in the secondary schools. But it's
so is there going to be an update to this now for the 70th anniversary?
Well, it's a project that we can consider at the Institute. I know in 2017 we started to do the 50th anniversary of the ministerial system, but along came Irma and then Maria, and it hasn't been. It's still unpublished. It's still being,
so it's
tweaked.
Still being put together.
Yeah,
okay.
But certainly it's something that we should finish up and get out there.
Okay.
So going back to what I was saying, at that time, when Stout, he became the chief minister, the first chief minister, and there was this country boys versus the town boys versus the country boys.
So that was also some of the community dynamics that was happening.
Yeah. And so, of course, the country boys, or country boy as they tend to call it then, became the chief minister. The country boys were Stout and Honorable T.B. Letzam, and I think it was Dawson versus, Fonseca and Scatliff and somebody at Osborne probably in town. So I'm hoping that, hopefully now we don't have those kind of, connotations going on now as we move forward. And last week I was talking about, changing the landscape a little bit. It's not that the men did not do well or not doing well, but, we want to continue to see more women at that policy-making level overall for the country. And, of course, that happened in 1995 when we had the first 2 women who were elected. But that's another project, and that's another talk.
That we're gonna talk more to the viewers about at some point.
But you're right. In the 60s, a lot of things started to happen. The socio-economic development of the territory took off with Stout and his successive governments and other governments that followed. With him and what he did, they have a lot to fill his shoes, to step in his shoes and continue to what he started.
I think he was really a visionary in terms of, seeing the possibility and the potential of the territory. So there were so many things that he pushed through his term and tenure as chief minister, because there were only probably 2 instances, during his lifetime where he wasn't the chief minister after he became, because then we had Chief Minister Honorable Willard Wheatley and
Correct.
Chief Minister Honorable Cyril Romney. Then he was still in politics at the time. So those were probably only 2 instances where he wasn't. But one of the challenges, again, this is probably one of those more popular historical facts, was that in 1969 now was where we had the debate about the leasing of Wickham Ski and the 2/3 of Anegada to Bates Hill Company by a previous administrator in secret negotiations that were later endorsed by the government. So there was where we had the public outcry from the Positive Action Movement, or PAM, that was led by Noah Lloyd and Walter Lindy de Castro against the sellout of the islands. And eventually the British government, quote unquote, lent $5.8 million for the settlement of the matter. However, the legislature never ratified the loan, therefore there was no commitment for reimbursement. So that was basically the other, I think, to me, was the other side of the story I was never told in terms of how that agreement was reversed, so to speak. In terms of, it wasn't just because of the protests that the developer decided, oh, well, I'm not going to do this again, but that there was actually a transaction in terms of he was paid out for it, because a lot of work had already started, actually, in terms of the reclaiming of Wickham Ski area into the development that we know it now. So that was, to me, one of those things that I learned through the research that I was doing. So onwards now into the 1970s.
Before we go on, I want to just read a segment here from something that was written about Stout and that issue about the Wickham Ski. It said that Mr. Stout saw the major issues, or one of the major issues during the 25 years of ministerial government, right, as the Wickham Ski and he got a problem. And he noted that Positive Action Movement started turning the stones, and he said he took it on and proposed that London reimburse Bates, which was the lessee, and get the properties back to the people. He said he got the support of the British government, and after all, though, he said it was the administrator who signed the agreement with Bates. Yeah. Because I got the sense that people were kind of maybe blaming him, that his government was short-sighted. Yeah, that they were the ones that had agreed to it. Apparently, he said it was the administrator. Yeah. Because that agreement, Positive Action Movement, they're credited for highlighting the weaknesses and unfairness of the agreement, which would have changed the whole composition of the islands in favor of the lessee. Right, so so a lot of things went on with that, but thankfully it was corrected thanks to Positive Action Movement, which was Lloyd and De Castro again, Walter Lindy de Castro. Some persons may not remember the name, I may not know the name, especially the younger generation, but certainly. Well, even my generation wouldn't know him as Walter Lindy de Castro. They would know him as Rasahuru, right? For the Sunrise Bakery, because that was his establishment, and that's how I knew him. Okay, growing up, that's who that was. And again, when I started to learn about the things that he had done, as a community activist, it was amazing, because it's like you would see the person and not think, that this is somebody who was outspoken and very vocal around an issue like this. So again, we have a lot of unsung heroes that, if we have a museum, we're able to highlight these things and put these things on display. So for me, that's really the heart of why you want to have a museum, not just to collect stuff, but to tell the Virgin Island story, in many different forms. And those untold stories that, oftentimes is just those who probably lived the era that know, of these things. So that definitely was an awesome thing, I think, that happened. There are other persons, too, who were deeply involved. But one person I want to also highlight, because she's still very much alive, and there are a couple of them probably are still alive. Mrs. Patsy Leek. Yeah. And it is our intention, and she doesn't know yet, but we hope to go and talk to her about, the Positive Action Movement and get her perspective and her side of the story as to, what they were trying to achieve and so on and so forth. And, very much a part of it.
Awesome. Yes, we have to capture
Yes.
every aspect of our story.
Yes.
So that's important. So all right. So government paid back dates, and we moved on. 1971. That was another historical movement, and this was when the first woman ran for office among the field of many candidates from the Virgin Islands Party, led by H.L. Stout. So this is where we saw now the Virgin Islands Party came on the scene for the 1971 elections. United Party was led by Conrad Maduro, and the Democratic Party was led by Dr. Q.W. Osborne. And there were several independent candidates. So, even though it had parties, a lot of persons would run independently. And then they would, basically, the winners would meet after election night, and form the government, as we would say, in terms of creating a majority, so that they would then go to the governor and say, this is what we would like to do. So in that election, after the elections, the independent candidate, Willard Wheatley, joined the Democratic Party that had won 3 seats to form the government and became the second chief minister. So this was what I was referencing before, where, there were some instances where, for the most part, again, a lot of people know Honorable H.L. Stout as chief minister, but there are actually terms when he wasn't. So this was actually the first one. In the second, there's a second chief minister. And that same year, the administrator's title was changed to governor. So then it became what we know it as today. There was political upheaval in the executive council between the chief minister and his ministers, where one was actually dismissed. So again, these are things that for me I was like, really? I didn't know we used to do those things. But anyway, so Honorable Dr. Osborne, and this was in the first year, and another resigned, Honorable Oliver Sills, in the second year. And a vote of no confidence against the government was imminent, but did not pass, as the chief was able to convince him to withdraw his resignation. So this was with Honorable Sills. And that I got out of the memoirs of H.R. Penn. So, I mean, that book, I tell you, the book is like yay thick, and it's so interesting because we had drama. We had a little bit of political drama. So it's a very interesting story, how he recounts. Because he was either in the executive council as a nominated person or a clerk, I think, at one point, or a speaker. And so he was always around the political arena, and had a first-hand view, basically, of what was happening. Further political turmoil came a few months later, with a resolution being passed and sent to the Secretary of State for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs for the removal of the governor, because he commuted the death sentence of Dennis Edwin against the advice of the Executive Council. The Secretary rejected the request, and the Ministers of Council felt that the governor had too much power, and it was time for action again. During 1972, it was resolved by the Legislature that a constitutional committee be set up of the whole council, chaired by the Speaker. This proved to be unsuccessful, and in May 1973, assistance from the UK was requested. 2 commissioners were sent. These were Deverell and Da Costa, who reported that the majority of the people did not want full internal self-government. The responsibility of finance be transferred to the chief minister, reduce the voting age to 18 because it was still at 21, and add a district with 2 members for Virgin Gorda and Anegada, and that the chief minister be elected by all the elected members of the LegCo after elections. So that was some major changes that we were talking about there. This was in 1973. All right, so the Wheatley government did not agree with many of the recommendations and put forward their own proposal, which was debated in council. Nothing was decided, as general elections were due shortly, and it was left off to be debated in the next council. So despite the political din, several significant projects were accomplished, such as the construction of the government central office and town plaza off Main Street. So this is what we call Old Admin. And the plaza that's now renamed to Oliver George's, the Deepwater Harbor at Port Purcell, and a new airport terminal. So these were the accomplishments in the 70s. AMBVI started to fly to Puerto Rico in 1972. However, economic development of the country was still slow due to a global recession since the late 60s. The tradition of USVI-BVI Friendship Day was started during this term in October 72 to foster stronger trade and economic ties. All right, so we had a somewhat eventful time there in the 70s. I guess we were kind of ramping up. The 75 general elections, they were no less dramatic than the previous one, and the United candidate, Honorable Willard Whitley, became Chief Minister again. So he received a second term.
And Stout was a deputy chief
by
minister.
joining with the Virgin Islands Party this time. So at this first meeting, the legislature resolved to amend the Constitution Order of 67 to include the responsibility of finances be given to an elected member. Thus, the financial secretary would cease to be a member of EXCO and LegCo. So that was one of those changes that I was also not aware of, because I always wondered, well, how come the Attorney General was allowed to be a part of both the Executive Council and the House of Assembly. So, you know, when I got in again to the history of it, we understood how the system was initially set up and it became the way it is now. The Chief Secretary was renamed the Deputy Governor. A Deputy Chief Minister would be appointed. There was an increase in districts to 9 and no more nominated members and required candidates to be Virgin Islanders. All right, so this was after the 75 elections that those things took place. Anything you want to note there?
No, you have covered it. I had more or less the same developments, right? Increase in districts, abolish nominated membership, remove finance from the governor to the chief minister. And that's when Honorable Willard Whitley became the first Minister of Finance, right? Because of that constitutional
that changed in 75.
Yep, in the 70s, BVI balanced its budget. This was 78, and we were no longer on what you call grant in aid.
Yep, so that was another significant milestone.
Correct.
Because again, up until that point, because the economy was not up to strength, basically, and you were collecting enough revenue to cover expenses for the government, then it meant that the shortfall would be covered by financial assistance from the United Kingdom government. So that, you know, and again, people probably saw things just running along, but may not have been aware that, you know, you can't have a deficit, you still have to pay the bill. So that was one of the things, though, again, we were able to put a plan in place to get to that place of actually balancing the budget and having enough revenue to be able to stand on our own, as it were. Okay, so that those changes we just talked about became the Constitutional Order of 1976, and that was enacted by the UK government. Significant legislation was constituted during this administration, where we had the Labour Code was implemented, Immigration and Passport Ordinance, and the Development Bank of the Virgin Islands was created. The Whitley-led government managed to balance the budget, as we had mentioned, and that happened in 1979, right? And we had actually been receiving grant and aid since 1950, when Commissioner Cruikshank had first obtained it. All right, so 75, 4 years later, general election in 1979, and this was our 9th legislature with Honorable H. Lavity Stout as Chief Minister and 3 other ministerial posts. And that year was the passage of Social Security Board Act. So that came into existence. So that's where we saw the big celebration last year for 2019.
Correct.
As it relates to the anniversary of the Social Security Board. So moving on to the 10th legislature, I was elected November 1983 with independent candidate Cyril B. Romney joining with the United Party to form the government after they won 3 seats. And the Virgin Islands Party actually won 3 seats. So it was 7 seats at a time, and there was a tie. So this administration was credited with the passage of the International Business Companies Act in August 1984. So, you know, for some of us, this is coming more into our lifetime in terms of us remembering, I remember when the International Business Companies Act was passed, and it, you know, there was a big celebration about that because of the importance of what it would mean. And it changed the economic trajectory, as financial services now became one of our main industries in our economy. All right. So, but there was a political drama again. I want to let you touch on it, Bernadine, as far as explaining what was happening there within the government.
And this was in 1983?
Yeah, that's 83, 84. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and this was when, so with this tie with the UP and the VIP, and Arnold Stout, he became the leader of the opposition at that time. I'm on the right here,
Yeah.
right? 1983? Okay. And independent candidate, successful candidate, Honorable Cyril Romney, became the chief minister after a coalition with the UP for a majority of 5. During that time, let's check my notes. So we talked about the when we came into financial services at that time.
Yeah.
Okay.
So one of the things that also was happening
lost the
around that
notes.
administration is that there was a vote of no confidence.
Oh, okay.
That was
That's the
going
one
to
we
be
leading up
called.
to. Right.
Yeah.
So this created a situation now with the elections having to be called earlier because by that time you were having 4-year elections,
cycles,
4-year
yeah.
cycles instead of 3 as it started out, 4-year cycles. And so the tenure of the legislature council at that time was cut short by 1 year, and so general elections were called in 1986. Yeah.
Yeah.
Vote
So
of
it
no
shifted.
confidence. Yes.
So the governor of the day was Governor Barwick. I remember learning that in school.
Governor David Barwick, I
Yes.
think his name was.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so the chief minister of the day, which was, again, Honorable C.P. Romney, asked Governor Barwick to dissolve the council, and early elections were held in that September.
Yes.
All right. So with the 11th legislation now coming out of this election, this became the third Stout government. And the subsequent elections held in 1990 returned a Stout administration. So all of this now was under the Virgin Islands Party banner.
Correct.
That he had helped found, basically, and was running. So rapid social and economic change and the close approach of the 24th century propelled Britain and the Virgin Islands to appreciate the need for further constitutional review. And there was a commission that was appointed in 1993, and a report submitted in the following year to the UK Parliament. In this, it was decided to implement the territorial at-large district for the election of 4 additional candidates. So that's when that change came into being, now, and the council again was increased in its size with those 4 additional seats.
Right, so we came from 9 to 13 at that time. Right, okay.
And the Speaker and the Attorney General were ex officio.
Yeah.
Proxy voting was abolished, and the voting age was reduced
From 21 to 18.
to 18 in the new Elections Act of 94. Right? So we
Another
had those.
interesting thing in that time frame was they revised the categories of status in the BVI, and that's where they started looking at belonger.
Okay, with
status.
residents.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes.
So so those came in with the immigration in terms of reform with the
ordinance.
Immigration Act.
Yeah.
Okay. So 95 and 99 elections were watershed moments in VI politics where the at-large candidates were elected on the strength of the district candidate,
Right.
and no independent candidates were returned for the first time, as well as the first female members were elected to the legislature. So you just mentioned that earlier. So those persons were...
Honorable Eileen Parsons and Honorable Etlyn Smith.
Okay. So which ticket were they on? Were they...
I don't recall. I can tell you though, again from this empowerment book, we have a list of the persons who ran, who won, and their affiliation.
Okay,
That's
so they
on the
have
page.
we have bios
Yes,
on
it's
them.
yes,
Okay.
it's in here.
All right.
Okay.
So we had Honorable Parsons and Honorable Smith.
I think she was, if I recall, CCM. It was a party called
Yeah,
CCM?
the Concerned Citizens Movement.
yeah.
And I think Honorable Smith was the 5th district, and Honorable Parsons was
She was at
one of the
at large.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Political development now from going into the 21st century. So a new political party entered the scene in 1999 called the National Democratic Party, led by Dr. D. Orlando Smith. They were successful. They did win some seats in 1999, but they were part of the opposition.
Yes.
At the time.
The VIP was able to regain the government at that time.
And then in 2003 was the first Smith administration, as well as in 2011, 2015, up until that point. As far as unseating the entrenched Virginians Party, that's what I wrote.
Before we move on, though, while I'm thinking about it, we talked about 1995 and that particular election, and a lot of things happened then. You know, 2 women won seats in the electrical for the first time, but that year too was a very significant one in that we lost the chief minister in office.
Oh yes, our first chief minister died in office.
He died in office in 1995. And that was a very sad time for the territory, and out of that the deputy then was sworn in as the chief minister, and that would have been Honorable Ralph T. O'Neill. But that's when we lost. And this year, 2020, is 25 years of the anniversary of his passing. And so we kind of, every year, of course, we commemorate his birthday. In March, we have the holiday. And so this year, we try to make it especially, memorable. Yeah. And that's when we sort of started looking back, because it coincided with the 70th anniversary of the restoration. And,
with the council, the council's anniversary this year.
So we started looking at his contribution specifically. Now I know sometimes persons usually ask, well, why we always kind of zero in on him, because we have a committee that's dedicated to, to planning the event every March. But we have to remember that he was actually the first chief minister. That is significant. So he is kind of regarded as the father of the nation. And yes, we know it's not him alone, because he did have a very good team along the way in his successive governments. Yeah. But he was a trailblazer. He was a nation builder, and the governments that have succeeded him, they have, like I say, some big shoes to fill. Yeah. So he is like, I would say, the Sir Grantley Adams of Barbados. He's the BVI Sir Grantley Adams. He's the
one of our founding fathers.
Yeah, and the Weber and them of Antigua, and so that's how he's regarded.
And I think is even before he became chief minister, because that wasn't the first time he had run and won political office, but he had been in the council before that.
Before that, correct.
So, it was probably a solid 30 years, I think, in terms of his political career and the different things that he was able to accomplish. So again, these are things that are important. Yeah. I think we have space dedicated to him at the college, which bears his name.
We do, correct. That's the H.L. Stout Memorial Room. It's like a kind of mini museum. You talked about museums earlier, and that whole space chronicles his life. Okay. So
so if persons want to know why he is so important to our history and our story as a political figure, that they can find all that information there at the college. And this is in the library. At the Learning Resource Center in the. Awesome. Okay. All right, so here we are in the late 90s now, going into the first part of the 21st century. United Party had long left the scene in the 80s. So again, that's where we had known the Virgin Islands Party as being the incumbent government for many years, because they were basically uncontested, so to speak. There would be, candidates that would come forward for a re-election cycle, but they would be in the minority and then basically be a part of the opposition. So constitutional reform that had started in 93 was completed in 2006. Not sure what happened there. Why did it take so long? Are you aware?
Also, this the constitutional review of 93 Okay, we had election in 95, 99.
Because the research I had was that it was put down, so to speak, for that long duration of time until 2006 when the NDP administration basically brought it back to the table and started negotiating the Constitution, like the changes, some more changes. And we had the Constitutional Order of 2007 that was approved and is substantially similar to the constitutions of a number of other British dependent territories. Because I remember Cayman, I think, had gotten their revisions as well as Turks and Caicos before us within that same time frame. All right. So this actually came into force just before the 2007 general elections that was to be held later on in that year. The new constitution adopted new nomenclature where the chief minister was renamed to the premier. The executive council became the cabinet, which is what we refer to it now as, and the legislative council became known as the House of Assembly. All right. Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court continued to be the judicial system that we are a part of. So, we never basically had our own court system because I think even from the Leeward Islands Federation days, that's where that would have first been constituted as part of, right? Yes. And then it was modernized over time. What else we had? So provision was made for the Police Service Commission in the 2007 Constitution, as was the Office of Director of Public Prosecution. So I remember that became a constitutional department, similar to the Auditor General, instead of it being a government department. And there's a big difference in terms of how it does its work. I think people may hear references to it where, they're not subject to the government. So it leaves them to be able to be more impartial in terms of doing the important checks and balances that they're supposed to be a part of.
More flexible.
Provision was made for public finance, a complaints commissioner, and a register of interests. The most recent amendment to the constitutional order was the implementation of 2 junior ministers in October of 2015. So again, those were actually constitutional changes that I think they were allowed for in the constitutional order of 2007, but we didn't actually implement it until 2015. So that was where that was. So unfortunately, that's where my paper ended. But we're obviously still had a couple more years. So this was 2007. So in the last, 10, 13 years, we've had elections in 2011, 15, 19. So those were the last 3.
Correct.
Yep. And we currently have a Virgin Islands Party administration led by the Honorable Andrew Foy. And this is his first term as the premier in terms of running the government. So in the last 10 years, what's significant that we can point to in terms of whether it's political milestones or political reform, I would think. I know for me in the last election, there was a lot more, again, we talk about women candidates that started to participate. Because one of the stories, and we're actually going to do the research and bring it back, is as it relates to what has been the political journey for women. Because sometimes we take for granted, whether or not there was interest there by persons, but it was more than that because it was something a lot that weighed heavily on whether or not the community was receptive at that time of women becoming political candidates. And that's not the case. We had to fight hard for a seat at the table, I would say. And, you want to see equal representation, as it were. Because if women are, more or less half of your population, then when it comes to the decision-making processes and the governance of the country, you want to see that equal representation as well. Because, there's differences in how we think. It's not a discriminatory thing or a biased thing, but I just think, it's important in everything. Because we talk about women being in leadership, from a professional standpoint, even in community leadership. It's important to see those representations. What's your thoughts there as it relates to that?
Yes, most definitely. We have seen how we have developed. It was male-dominated for the most part in those early years, and as the community became more accepting and more open, you see the first two ladies becoming, being successful at the polls. That does not say that there were other women who tried in the process, way back, I don't want to call it a year, but years, it may have been, I don't know, the 60s or the 70s or whatever. You had Mrs. Mercer in Bogasby attempting to become a political candidate, legislator. And so, but like you said, in the research, and as we move forward with the story, that's another chapter that you have started research on and that we'd work on, together with the Virgin Islands Studies Institute, assisting there with the research. And as we go along, yes, we are seeing more and more women jumping into the political arena, and we're just, hoping that, and, that there will be that support. Like I said, I'm going back to the little funny ways there about the tongue boys and the country boys, and now it has turned out to, we don't want it to be a thing with men against men and women and making a choice there, but just look at what the persons can bring to the table, and the women who have actually succeeded and become members of the Legislative Council, what have they brought to the table, and balance out the viewpoints and so on and so forth. Because down the road, quite frankly, we would like to have our own Eugenia Charles, and our own Margaret Thatcher. Yes,
premier at some point.
Yeah, so.
And because even when we look regionally and globally, I think starting regionally, we really have not had a lot of female prime ministers or presidents. We've seen in Jamaica, Trinidad, Barbados was probably the most recent one.
Yeah.
I guess Dominica was the first.
Was the first, Eugenia
with
Charles.
With Eugenia Charles. So we still only on one hand, even from a regional standpoint. And, a lot of it, guys, even if we don't want to admit it, because we were a patriarchal society, you wouldn't have fathers encouraging their daughters to go out and say you're going to run for political office, because again, sometimes it's seen as, it's really rough and tumble, and a woman can't handle it, those types of comments that will be made sometimes. But again, we've grown a lot. I think we've matured, and so around the world this year, even with the pandemic, I saw an article that was talking about the difference between how female presidents may have handled it differently to their male counterparts. And again, it's about their skill set, because sometimes from a gender standpoint, your perspective is different, but you have the same skills, but your approach may be different. And I think one of the youngest is right now the president of Finland. She's in her late 30s. So, and even that is something that we're seeing in terms of generationally. I think there's a shift back to, the younger generations getting involved in politics from early, even if it's something that, they progress in as the years go by. Because I remember telling someone one time, they were talking about me being too young to run for office in my 30s. And I turned to them and asked them, well, how old do you think that Honorable Lavity Stout was when he became the first chief minister?
Yeah, he was in his 20s.
Yeah. So it's something where, again, if that season demands for it, then that's what we know. But, persons have come along and they remember him from being older. When he had actually, been in politics for close to 30 years, if not more.
Even the current premier, he started quite young. I recall when we used to go to what you call the Caribbean something, but we used to have like parliamentary debate sessions, and he took a very active part in that. And I just knew along the line somewhere that
he would progress that direction.
He would progress in that direction, and so I'm not surprised at all that I figure one day, yes, he would make it where he is now. Yeah, he was very interested in that. But you asked a good question about what now? We have gone through a lot of socioeconomic development, infrastructural development, and so on and so forth. And now, at this point in time, we are asking, so where do we go now? What's the next step? And funny enough, again, in as we continue to put this whole story together, I came across remarks by the late Honorable Stout, where he had mapped out us having to think about where we are going. And I think even Honorable Cyril Romney was talking about the 3 steps in this process. Once you have the ministerial system, then the next step is associate statehood, and then you go on to independence. And it seems, from what you're saying, that that second step is no longer an option.
Because of how the I guess the global political
exactly. So now
climate
we're
is
going
now.
from, we're in the ministerial system. Yes, we're still under Britain, but the next step really perhaps would be we have to look at independence. But there's a cost. There are benefits, yes, but there's a cost as well, because we definitely have to prepare. We have to prepare this country. And so Stout started it on a good footing. He left us in 95, and others have taken over, and we are moving forward. And we have to make sure that, Yeah.
And I think that's an excellent point in terms of even from then. Again, the vision was there.
Yes,
that we won't stay a dependent territory forever. And having that plan, I think that for me is one of the things that's most urgent for us as a community, I think, to come together and sit down and develop the plan, decide where is it that we want to be in the next 25 years.
Yes.
And what would that look like from a political relationship or economic perspective, the social aspects of it, and start the negotiations. Because as we can see, depending on what it was, some things, happened quickly. Other times, things took a while to get through. Because again, there's another party in the story. So it's like, we can't just decide, yes, this is what we're going to do tomorrow,
That's right.
and just go to the legislature and make that decision, but that we have to consult with the UK government.
That's correct.
On a lot of different matters still. So I think anticipating some really good, robust discussions coming out of the next constitutional review.
Right.
I know some people have very strong opinions about certain things. But it's for us to get that information out.
Yes.
Because let's say, for example, we're hearing now Barbados talking about removing the Queen as the head of state. So again, in school, we would have learned, Barbados was independent as far as we were concerned. Right. And then you learn about the Commonwealth, the British Commonwealth that, was a system that was still in place, and it had a impact or played a part in these independent countries' government, and what it means for them now to basically be cutting all ties from a colonial past is one of the things I heard a commentator made of the statement of the other day when I saw them. I think it was a speech from the throne, basically. So the current Governor General is who made the comment, on behalf of the Prime Minister and the government, saying that that's their next move to truly, stand on their own, as the old people say, every tub has to stop on their own bottom. So, but it's interesting, again, to see it now and the different reactions that there is to it, because some people still want to hold on to that, to that kind of British legacy, as it were, versus other persons are saying, nope, time to cut the rope and leave the dock.
It's like, you can't live in your mother's house
forever. And that for me is part of my I guess my argument for advancement. Whatever it looks like is again up to us. And what persons may have argued about, 25 years ago, talking about, what's going to happen? Are we going to need an army or those again are things for us to decide. Because not all independent countries are required to have a military. There's no requirement around that, actually, I don't think. So, it's for us really to decide.
It depends on the resources, I guess, that you have, because, like it's again, political advancement in itself, it means nothing. You have to have, what is required. The territory has to be economically sound, the social structure,
institutions in place, and they're healthy.
And so as we understand what it is we need to do and, make up our minds, do we have the resources, can we do it, whatever. The next step then is to just move ahead. Just plan for it. And make sure that the the populace or the electorate, the persons out there, the general man on the street, that they understand and that they're comfortable and we're ready for it.
Yeah.
You know. And the last thing I would say is that I would also like to see all of this knowledge and so on. I probably said it before, but in the schools, because we want the young people to be a part of this process, to start getting interested in civics and in political science, and, you know, taking up from those who have now gone on from, you know. We want to see
definitely
them,
succession planning.
Yeah, succession planning, prepare themselves for becoming leaders of this country, and including political leaders. You know, so.
Yeah, you need all levels now in terms of, you know, those in the public service, business leaders, community leaders, your religious leaders, as well as your political leaders. So we have to truly, again, teach it to the next generation, so they have that appreciation and understanding of, you know, who we are as a people, and then they can better identify what their role is going to be within their community. So that's so key. Well, Miss Louis, we're going to have to stick a pin here, because obviously we could stay here and talk even more longer. But if you just tuned in, you missed out on an awesome conversation about our Virgin Islands political history and heritage. And we are going to actually have the video for this up very soon on the Facebook page as well as YouTube channel. So go on Facebook, like the page, the Vigilate Dialogues. Go into YouTube, you can search and you'll find the YouTube channel. There's actually quite a few videos on there that we have been talking about, you know, these types of conversations for a while. There was one on good governance I dusted off and I posted on the Facebook page. So be sure to go out and check that out. The show will replay here on Sunday at 9, and we're back again on Saturdays at 3 p.m. Again, the Vigilate Dialogues is sponsored by Smith & Associates, your strategic planning and project management specialists. Contact us at 340-1199 to schedule a free half-hour consult to discuss your project needs. All right? Oh, before we go, public service announcement. I almost forgot. So I have a thing with rules of the road, because, you know, sometimes I feel like I need to just sail to Tongue and sail back home, because driving on our roads, I could tell you. But anyway, I went and did some research and I found a nice little video talking about how to give way on the road. So whether it's at intersections, like for example, the change of traffic on the Noah Lloyd Drive, where we enter on into admin, there has to be some give way. So we have to, you know, learn the rules of the road as it relates to that. And I also went and found the BVI driver's manual. So I'm going to have that on the Vigilate Dialogues Facebook page. So if you've never seen it, it's a good read. It's actually an ebook that you can basically flip the pages online and check that out. So that's going to be there. So let's be safe drivers on the road, looking out for pedestrians or cyclists as well as our fellow drivers. And our life hack, I came across an article this week talking about how to decline a meeting. So if you're like me and feel like you're spending every waking minute in a meeting, this has some really great tips on how to manage those invites and, you know, which ones you can decide to go to and how to turn them down. So be sure, again, to check that out on the page. I'm going to have that information. So that's a life hack, because we really have to come out of Zoom land. You know, I've been spending too much time in there the last 6 months, so trying to find the exit, as it were. Word of encouragement. So let's not get tired of doing what is good at just the right time. We will reap a harvest of blessing if we don't give up. This is taken from Galatians chapter 6, verse 9. Let's not be weary in well-doing. So until next time, I'm your host, Shayna Smith, saying let's continue the changing conversation for a better Virgin Islands.
Amen.
BVI, baby. British Virgin Islands, this one's for us. Put your hands up.